DFS DJ Nation, what is up? What is happening? We are back again for another week. We are on to week 11. We've already had a little bit of craziness with the Bills game that looked like it was going to be a snow game, which I'm not going to lie, I was kind of excited about just because, those games, you don't get to see that very often. But, with a projected 6 feet of snow that they could possibly get, it probably made sense for them to move it. So now that game has been moved to a dome to Detroit. So that is going to kind of flip this slate on its head because it was starting to look like you could pretty much fade that Buffalo game. Now it is one of the better games on the entire slate for this weekend. Right now, in terms of just Vegas totals, we have the Bills that are or actually have the highest implied point total now on the slate at 20.25, and then you have the Ravens, and then the Falcons. I don't understand, and then you have the Eagles who are at 26, the Cowboys are at 24.5, and then the Giants coming in at 24 here in that week's or in that game. So, Maddie, how are you feeling about this slate overall before we just get into the positions?
So, something that I'm as just kind of keeps popping into my head as I look at the games and the players we have to build our teams with. Is there anybody on this slate that you look at and you just go, that guy can post a score that you absolutely have to have, or else you are absolutely toast? Is there anybody on this slate that checks that box for you? Like, for example, last week we talked about Tyreek Hill. Even though he was 9,100, we said, this is a spot he could score 45 to 50 and bury you. Like, is there a guy that you just have that expectation for this week?
I mean, I think there's players that could potentially do it. I mean, Justin Jefferson, I think definitely can.
Okay.
There's no defense. I know the Cowboys, are what, like fourth? Yeah, they're fourth in pass DVOA on the year. They're a really good pass defense, but he's just unreal.
Yeah,
and the volume that he's seeing, 29 targets over those last two games as well. I think he's somebody, but like I don't view him though as like, oh, you have to have this guy, because I think you have Devontae Adams who can do the same, and Stephon Diggs who can do some of the same things as well. But there's nobody that stands out that's like just an absolute must-have in my opinion.
I tend to agree. And so when we talk about a lot of these guys, there's going to be some guys that we typically, will cross off our lists on some of these slates that we've had this year. And we'll look at them this week, and we're like, I'd be totally okay if this guy got me 20 to 25. Usually we say, let's chase the 30 to 35, 40 point upside. I just don't know that there's, more than one or two guys on the slate that can get you there. And even those guys, like you said, even those guys are not even in the best matchups to do it. So, you got Devontae Adams. He can absolutely score 30, but he's playing Denver in Denver. Jefferson playing Dallas. So there's definitely some high upside guys. They're just in tough matchups. Like AJ Brown is against Indy, a lot of the league's lowest production of wide receivers. So all that being said, before we kick this off at the quarterback position, I just think it's a slate where you should combine a floor and ceiling combo as opposed to just looking at ceiling this week, because, I just don't know that there's going to be guys, that end up burying you. And the guy that goes off may end up being like a Christian Watson. Like last week's slate, he was one of only like two guys to score in the 30s, and the rest of the rosters were in the 25-ish range. And I just think that, if you shoot for guys that are going to score 25, I think that's a great way to build rosters. And you may not win a tournament this week, but with how ugly it is and how little value it is, you'll definitely, have a chance. So that's the kind of mindset and approach that I'm going to take this week, as opposed to, getting absolutely crazy and trying to stack up a low 41 total game, because we only have like 3 or 4 games that are over a 45 total. So I'm going to, once again, it feels similar to last week's slate. I'm just going to focus on those high total games to have my quarterback come from. And there's really only 2 QBs that I like this week, one being Justin Fields, In Atlanta as a underdog, Atlanta's actually favored in that game by 3 points. So while it's a great spot for David Montgomery to run the ball with Khalil Herbert on IR, the Bears possibly could be trailing. And I think a reason that the Falcons are favored is because of how good the Falcons are at running the football. And the Bears, since they made those trades, Roquan Smith is gone, and I don't remember the other key defensive guy that they traded away, but ever since they made those trades, they've been giving up an insane amount of points, and Atlanta's actually been able to put up points this year. So I definitely, from a fantasy perspective, I wouldn't trust a ton of these Atlanta guys because they can get weird with how their points are scored. So it could be, a spot where Atlanta scores 30 points, but none of their guys score 20 plus from a fantasy perspective, because London can catch a touchdown but only go for 30 yards, and Pitts can do the same, and Cordero Patterson can score twice but only rush for 40 yards because they've got 3 or 4 running backs that are involved on a regular basis. So all that to say is I really like Fields again this week. He's priced up now at 7,600, but I just think that his involvement in the offense, and with Khalil Herbert being on IR, it's the entire offense is going to, all the points, you could honestly play Fields and Montgomery together and get every single touchdown that the Bears score. So I think that that's an interesting way to go. And assuming that the Bears can put up 30 plus points again against a really bad Atlanta defense, I think that's a very interesting way to approach the slate. And then the other QB that I have heavy interest in is 2K cheaper than Fields, and that's Daniel Jones. The Detroit Lions play a ton of man coverage. And if you scroll through game logs this year against mobile QBs, they've gotten absolutely torched on the ground by mobile QBs. Geno Smith shredded them. It's really been every mobile quarterback that they've played has had a ton of rushing production against them. And like I said, it's because they play a ton of man coverage. And when defenses get in man coverage, the corners tend to turn their backs and chase the receivers down the field. And when it turns into a scramble drill, there's no linebackers and corners there to be ready to defend the quarterback. So the quarterbacks usually have a ton of room to scramble around. So Daniel Jones he definitely has the ability to run for 100 yards here. And they're at home, they're favored, and it's one of those totals that's in the 45 range, which if we think about, all the games that are in that range, those games are typically they have the total that at that spot because they could blow up. But they're not, as sure to blow up as a Chicago Atlanta. So they're not going to be at the 50 mark, but Detroit, New York, they absolutely could score, a total of 55 to 60 points. It wouldn't shock me at all. So I really like Daniel Jones and I really like Justin Fields, and that's where I'm going at QB this week.
Okay. I don't mind it. The only thing that worries me with Daniel Jones is they just don't throw the ball very much. I mean, he has a few games here, but I mean, he has really only 2 games over 30, or 3 games with over 30 pass attempts on the season. They're a team, if they can, they will, like last week where he only had threw for 17 times. It's going to depend on, can Jared Goff away from home outside of the dome, can he, make this team have to, throw the ball a lot? And so if that doesn't worry me a little bit. He's 5,700. Who I like is Russell Wilson. Like, this Raiders team, you want to talk about a bad defense? The Raiders team is terrible. Like, it's not even close to terrible. I mean, it's beyond terrible at this point. They have just been eviscerated by opposing quarterbacks this year. And they allow QB1 weeks after QB1 weeks after QB1 weeks. And it's no surprise that Russell Wilson's best game of the year was against this defense. He's only $5,800. Yes, they're probably not going to have Jerry Jeudy, but I still think with Cortland Sutton and Greg Dulcich, I still think that it could be a point of where he can get things going on through the air. Like I said, his best game of the year was against the Raiders week 4, where he had put up 27 in that game. And so I think Russell Wilson is kind of a sneaky play here against a really bad Raiders defense. And so I don't mind.
I like it in large field tournaments just because of how bad the Broncos have been. And I definitely do have interest in the Broncos pass catchers. Me personally, I don't know that I'll get to a full blown Broncos stack. But yeah, in large field tournaments, I think that makes a ton of sense. And the run back is so easy, right? Because Jacobs and Devontae Adams, they account for what 50 to 60% of the whole Raiders production this year. So it's like your run back is so easy, and that's a game that nobody's going to stack because of how low the total is. But you're right. I mean, if Denver can be efficient, I like that call a lot. I'll probably personally just end up playing one of Sutton or Dulcich without Russ, but absolutely am 100% on board with that.
Yeah. And then I think some of the other options here, not mentioning, Josh Allen, but I think Lamar Jackson's in a really good spot at home against Carolina. Carolina's defense has not been very good this year. Obviously, I think him and Justin Fields have kind of turned into very similar assets where these guys are going to run the ball, 8 to 12 times in a game. That he also has, the ability to get you 100 yards rushing. Um, much like Justin Fields does. And I think it's a good matchup for them. And it looks like Mark Andrews is going to be back for this game. So that is very encouraging for him. And I think his usage. And I think if you want to play him naked, you can. But he's obviously, almost $1,000 more than Justin Fields is. He's 8,400. But I do feel like this is a game that, you could see them that would be really good to use him. And then I think some other options is because we had so many injuries this week, and with like Stafford would have been interesting, I think, at his price, but no Cooper Cup, and so Cooper Cup is out in that game, so that kind of makes me not really love him. To me, I think it really comes down to a couple of things here for me. Like I said, I like Russell Wilson, and I think if you also want to get different, I think Joe Burrow at $6,800 against Pittsburgh. They're also going to be without Minka Fitzpatrick, which is a big blow to that secondary that they have. That's already not a very good defense that really struggles to stop opposing wide receivers and quarterbacks. They still won't have Jamar Chase, but they still have plenty with T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd and Hayden Hurst in that game. So Joe Burrow is only $6,800. It still feels too cheap for the kind of upside that he possesses. I mean, he's somebody that can put up, 35, 40 points in a game or DK points. And then I think Dak Prescott here, we kind of talked about it a little bit, but this Dallas-Minnesota game, I think, is going to go overlooked because I think people are going to maybe get some pieces from this game. But I think this game actually has the potential to go nuclear. I know Dallas's defense has been pretty good, like we kind of talked about with Justin Jefferson. Their defense has been really good, but I also feel like Dallas hasn't played a lot of high-powered, like really good offenses either. They're kind of in some of these other, with this NFC East, really, playing against them. I mean, there's nobody there. I mean, if you look at their schedule, it's not anything daunting of teams that they've really had to face. So this could be one of the best offenses they have seen this year. And so I'm not saying that I think Dallas defense is like terrible or not like highly overrated, but I also don't think they've really seen an offense like this, right? Because if you look, I mean, they played the Bengals, but the Bengals were struggling at that time. Their offense was not playing very well. They played the Giants, the Commanders, the Rams, whose offense has been god awful. They lost 26-17 to the Cowboys or to the Eagles. Then they played the Lions, the Bears. The Packers put up 31 on them. I mean, so they just haven't played any defense, and so I'm not going to shy away from playing Kirk Cousins. At only $6,100. You can stack him with Justin Jefferson if you want to, throw TJ Hawkinson in there. Maybe you do something with Adam Thielen. Then I think you can run it back with somebody like CeeDee Lamb, who has been seeing a lot of usage in this offense, 15 targets last week. Or I think you can go with Dalton Schultz. I think is also he was seeing almost a 30% target share, in the offense as well. And he's only $4,300. So I think there's a lot of pieces in this game we can get to. And I just think this game's going to go a little bit overlooked, and everybody's going to want to play the Buffalo game, or I do think the Chicago Atlanta game. People are going to want interest in that as well. I don't know if people are going to be fully game stacking that game, but I think definitely people are going to get pieces from it. And so I just think Dallas and Minnesota is going to go overlooked.
Yeah, I don't mind Dallas, Minnesota either. It's also worth noting that DeMarcus Lawrence. He's apparently playing with some sort of fracture in his foot, and he's got a knee injury as well. So they said he's going to play, but he's definitely going to be playing through an injury. And that's, Dallas is a big reason that the Dallas defense has been lights out this year is because of the pressure they've been getting on the quarterback between Lawrence and Micah Parsons. So, a reason Dallas defense struggled last week against Green Bay is they couldn't stop the run. So, I mean, I definitely think Dalvin could, get rolling here again, which is something we can talk about at running backs. But I definitely think that there's points to be scored, I guess is the point trying to get across is that I do think Minnesota can score a little bit on Dallas. I just don't know if it's going to go all through Justin Jefferson if they do. So, yeah, I like that game as well.
I think other than that, the quarterback options here, I don't know. Maybe I'll be interested to see if Marcus Mariota gains any people want to play him at $5,500, especially with that implied point total. But I just can't do it. Like even on the ground, like he's been okay. Like he gets like 30, 40, maybe 50 rushing yards, in a game. I think that's the most he's had was 72, and that was all the way back to week 1. But other than that, he's not running a ton. As much as you would think with him, but they are just running the ball at such a high pace. He doesn't throw the ball very much, but he is only 5,500. I personally won't have any interest in him, but he's 5,500 there. Past that, I just don't think there's anybody that really stands out to me. So to me, I think my favorite quarterback options this week are going to be Lamar Jackson, and then Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson, I think are going to be the 3 guys that really stand out to me that, if I want to get a little bit different here. Oh, and Joe Burrow, I didn't include him. The 4 guys that I really want to play this week at quarterback.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
And I don't say that to say that, I obviously Justin Fields is 100% in play, $7,600. But I think even at his price, he is going to be highly owned. I think people are going to still play him. He's still much cheaper. He's still cheaper than Josh Allen. He's still cheaper than Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts. Mm-hmm. I don't think his price reflects. He should be up there. He should be in the 8K range.
Oh, yeah, 100% agree. I mean, he's running the ball 13 to 15 times a game over his last 5. Like, he's a top end running back that's playing quarterback position, and so he's getting, he's got at least 80 rush yards in 4 of his last 5. 2 of those he's gotten a 100-yard rush bonus, and has rushing touchdowns. So you're essentially, before you even factor in any quarterback stats, you're getting 15 plus DK points out of Justin Fields on the ground if he scores a rushing touchdown. So it's like, okay, well then he only needs to throw for 150 and a score, and that's another 10 points right there, and all of a sudden you're at 25. And so then, it's okay. Well, what if he throws for 202? Okay. Now all of a sudden you're at 30 plus. So it's and against Atlanta, I don't think Atlanta is going to be the team that eventually stops him. So, yeah, I think on this slate with the uncertainty and the lack of value that we have, like there's maybe 1 or 2 guys that are below 4K that are not tight ends that are even remotely considerable. For me at least, I just, I think taking, those 25 points at quarterback this week, and then with a guy that could score 45 still, I think that, for somebody like me that plays one roster, I think I'm just going to play Fields and be different. And, like I said, and this could be a good segue to running back if you're done with QB, but I don't know how many people are going to play Fields with Montgomery together.
Nobody.
Yeah, so it's like I get all the touchdowns for Chicago if I play them together, and they've scored over their last 5 games. They've scored 30, 32, 29, and 33. It's the last 4 games. So essentially, I'm banking on the highest total game of the week getting there, and I get all the touchdown production from Fields passing or rushing and Montgomery rushing because Khalil Herbert's out. I don't think Ebner's going to step into a big role. I think Montgomery gets 20 plus touches here. So I really like the idea on a slate where there's, limited value, just plugging in Fields and Montgomery together and just saying, okay, I'm just going to get 30 plus points, like real team points from Chicago. And I get every touchdown that comes from that between those 2 guys. So I think that's an interesting way to go on this slate. And, if one of them completely breaks the slate and the other doesn't, you still have that one guy on your team that went absolutely nuclear. Like if Montgomery were to score 3 touchdowns and Fields doesn't score at all, is definitely viable. I don't know what the ownership looks like yet on Montgomery. He's going to be semi popular, but you would still have that score on your team, and I just don't see Fields not doing anything at all. So I like the idea of playing them both together.
All right, so let's dig a little bit more into the running backs. So you have Saquon Barkley, who's at the top of the list, 8,900, and once again an elite matchup against Detroit. He played last week against the Texans, who are the worst run defense in the league, and now you have the Lions, who are right there, not far off of them, just another terrible run defense on the year. And so he's $8,900. Then you have Nick Chubb, who's 8,200, Dalvin Cook, who's 8K, and then you have Jonathan Taylor, who's still too cheap at $7,800. Alvin Kamara at 7,600, and Josh Jacobs 7,500. Joe Mixon 7,400. Miles Sanders is 69. And then the rest of the 6K rate is Ramondre Stevenson, Dameon Pierce, Tony Pollard, Cordell Patterson, Dave Montgomery at 61, DeAndre Swift, Jamal Williams, and then possibly Zeke Elliott at 6K. Kind of wraps out the group. I'm going to go right back to the Jonathan Taylor well. He may be a lot more popular this week, but he was somebody that I talked about last week that I really wanted to play, that he was not going to carry any ownership. He was too cheap and a great matchup against the Raiders, and he came through with 27, best game of the year. And very similar to last week. This is a Eagles defense that really struggles to stop opposing running backs. That is where that they have had problems. They are very good against the pass, but against the run, they've really struggled, which is probably why they signed Ndamukong Suh today, because to help with that run defense. But the Eagles allow the 12th most DK points to the position. They've allowed the 15th most rushing touchdowns, the 9th most rushing, or the 9th most 15th most receiving or rushing yards, ninth most rushing yards, and they are 28th in rush DVOA. So it is a very good matchup for Jonathan Taylor, who played 95% of the snaps last week. I saw 22 carries, had 2 targets. He also ran a route on 75% of dropbacks in that game, and he had 163 yards and a score. And so I just think Jonathan Taylor is in an elite spot this week again against the Eagles. They are at home as well, so I think he is 100% in play for a running back. And I think that Tony Pollard, I still like Tony Pollard. I don't really care if Zeke Elliott plays. Like we kind of talked about that last week, right? And Zeke, he didn't get ruled out. Like it doesn't matter to me that if Zeke plays or not, because he's I know last week he had 22 carries, but for the most part, the week before that we saw him, he only had 14 carries. Like he's not a player who needs this heavy workload to be able to get you there. And so he's still only $6,500. It's a pretty good matchup against Minnesota. If you're wanting to stack this game up, like we talked about, I think he could definitely be included in a stack. And so I think Tony Pollard at 6,500 is somebody that I also like up here in this range.
Yeah, and I will just add on Ramondre Stevenson, who's essentially taken over the lead back role for New England. He's got 21 targets in his last 3 games, and one of those games was a 26-3 victory over Indianapolis. So where he still had, what was it, 8? Yes, he still had 7 targets in a game they won by 23 points and won the entire time. So he's become a main factor in their passing game, and definitely has one of the better floor ceiling combos this week. I mean, maybe he's not one of the higher ceiling guys on the slate. Like he's not going to hit 40 like Saquon can, but you're definitely getting a 2K discount for the floor that Stevenson brings, and wouldn't be surprised if he ends up with 25 again. Like he's scored 16, 21, 24, 25, 22 in his last 5 games. It's very solid for a guy that's been splitting work with Harris, but is essentially taken over the lead role there. So it's become a year where there's not many lead backs other than Saquon and Derrick Henry that are just outright taking the entire share of their backfield. So it's okay playing some of these guys that are getting the majority of the split but are still in a split. So I think Ramondre is a great play at 6,700. Even if he doesn't score, I mean, I think he's going to still catch 5 or 6 passes. I already mentioned David Montgomery. That's probably the cheapest I'll go. Unless we get clarity on the Baltimore situation, if Gus Edwards were to miss, $5,900 Kenyon Drake is definitely in play. The Washington guys are interesting, but I think they're more of a split than what I want to get exposure to on this slate. They just smashed Philly, and Philly's been a great matchup for running backs all year. The Washington running backs did a great job against Philly, and now they get an even better matchup against Houston. So they're definitely in consideration. I don't know that I'm going to end up there, but I mean, $5,300 for Brian Robinson Jr., who could absolutely fall into the end zone twice, is definitely something to consider on a slate that has no value. So he's interesting. And then, of course, all the high price guys. I like, if we're paying all the way up, Barkley is the obvious one. But like I mentioned, Dalvin Cook against a Dallas team that literally cannot stop the run right now. Just give up 200 yards rushing to Green Bay. The ghost of A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones combined for 200 yards. And then Jonathan Taylor, we just mentioned, Washington just obliterated Philly on the ground, and Philly can't stop the run. They've been one of the worst run defenses in the NFL this year. Jonathan Taylor playing in a refound smash mouth offense under Jeff Saturday with the surprise start of Matt Ryan last week out of thin air. So, which is better for the offense, I think, and better for Jonathan Taylor as well. Ellinger doesn't like to dump it off the running backs much, but Matt Ryan definitely will. So, I think Taylor has a great floor ceiling combo here as well.
So I think a few other cheaper options here at running back. One, I do agree with you. Obviously, the Washington situation is about as good as you can ask for against opposing running backs because, like I said, Houston is just terrible. They're 31st at rush DVOA. They allow the most rushing yards. And over their last 3 games, they were allowing 218 rushing yards per game over the last 3 games they played. And so they're just dreadful. And I think if you look at them right now, I think this favors Brian Robinson in terms of what game script could be. Because if the Washington football or the Commanders are able to kind of build a lead here, it's going to be Brian Robinson. We saw him last week; he had 26 carries in that game against the Eagles. He played 51% of the snaps in that game. But the thing with Brian Robinson though is he's just been terrible. Like efficiency wise, he is horrific. 46th in yards created per touch. He just hasn't been very good at all. 52nd in yards created per touch and 47th in breakaway run rate, which is carries of 10 plus yards. So I think he only has like 2. He's not involved in the passing game whatsoever. He literally has 7 receiving yards in the season. He's averaging 0.7 targets per game. He's just a non-factor there. So despite, he had 26 carries last week, but only 86 rushing yards, right? So, but he is only $5,300, and it is an even better matchup against one of the worst run defenses in the league. So it does make some sense where you see Antonio Gibson mix in. He's been more of the pass catching threat here in this backfield. Seeing almost 4.5 targets per game. J.D. McKissick has been out. He doesn't like he's going to practice or play again this week. So, I mean, if this game were to stay close, then I think it makes maybe a little bit better for Antonio Gibson here. So I do think both of them are interesting options. But Brian Robinson, depending on game script, could end up being the better play, and he's the cheaper option. I think another situation that's very similar to that one is this Atlanta situation because you have Tyler Algier, who is really cheap. He's only $4,900. I don't know why he's priced down the way that he is because if you just look at the way things have turned out for them, they've pretty much been splitting between him and Cordell Patterson. Last week, Tyler Algier played 45% of the snaps, which is more than what Cordell Patterson played. Cordell Patterson played 38% of the snaps. He saw 9 carries and he ran a route on 27% of dropbacks last week. You compare that to Cordell Patterson, who only played 38% of the snaps, and he also had 9 carries. Chicago was dreadful against the run as well, 26 in rush DVOA. They allow the 4th most DK points to the position. They've also allowed the 5th most rushing yards and the 2nd most rushing touchdowns. So I think that is also a spot. And if I had to choose, I think I would probably go Tyler Algier here in this game. As the cheaper option because, like I said, he played more snaps than what Cordell Patterson did. And Cordell Patterson is not even being used in the passing game. I don't know why, but he's not. He's only averaging 1.5 targets per game, and he only has 39 receiving yards on the season. And so again, he is a non-factor in the passing game. And so Tyler Algier is actually seeing more opportunities in the passing game. He saw 3 targets at 3 receptions last week. So I think Tyler Algier is really cheap, and I think in a great elite matchup here. So I do think Tyler Algier, if you want to get even cheaper at 4,900, I think this is a real opportunity to play somebody that is below the 5K range that can definitely pay off because he doesn't have to do a ton. I mean, if he gets 70 yards and a score, you're probably pretty happy with it. Maybe a couple of receptions, you're probably pretty happy with it at the price that he is. And there's no to me, the running back position this week, I think is kind of gross because there's not a lot of just standout, okay, this guy's an absolute smash spot. Like you have Saquon up top, 100%, right? Dalvin Cook could possibly get there. Love Jonathan Taylor, but then Alvin Kamara against the Rams, I don't really know if I want to do that. Josh Jacobs against the Denver defense, don't know if I really want to mess around with that. Joe Mixon, obviously, he's a week removed from that monster game that he had against Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh's actually been really good against the run. Miles Sanders against Indy, they're good against the run. Ramondre Stevenson, I know you talked about him, but I will say the Jets have been elite against the run this year. They've done a really good job stopping opposing running backs. They are, I believe, 8th in rush DVOA on the year. So that is a tougher matchup. And so, I mean, Dameon Pierce, again, Washington, great against the run. There's a lot of just really bad matchups this week. So I think getting a little bit different and finding something like this, because I also think the other guy I want to talk about is Devin Singletary. He's 5,800 in a terrific matchup this week for him. And where was that at? Okay, right here. And so he's actually handling 63% of the opportunities from this backfield, averaging about 14 touches per game on the season. And he's actually 5th in routes run. So he's actually running a lot of routes, averaging 4.5 targets per game out of this team. And then Cleveland, again, horrendous against the run. 32nd in rush DVOA. They've allowed the 3rd most DK points to the running backs, 6th most rushing yards, and 4th most rushing touchdowns on the season. So Devin Singletary, I think, is also kind of a sneaky option here. Maybe get a little bit of leverage off the pass catchers here in this Buffalo game that a lot of people are going to want to play. So Devin Singletary, $5,800, I think, is also another decent spot this week.
Yeah, I don't mind Singletary either. Anybody on the Bills is good by me.
Yeah, I think it's just a good way to get access to this game. So I think for me, that's kind of the running backs that I'll be looking at this week. Like I said, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon, we don't talk about, obviously, but I think Jonathan Taylor, Tony Pollard are two guys that I really like up here in this range. I wish I could play DeAndre Swift, but I just can't do it.
No, I can't do it either.
And he's going to come, and I guarantee you it's going to come, and he's going to have a big game. And it's just nobody's going to play him. He's going to have no ownership because he's so hard to trust. I think last week he played 30% of the snaps compared to 16% the week before, but he's just not being utilized whatsoever. Only 6 carries last week, only 3 targets. I don't know. I wish they would because the Giants have actually really struggled against opposing running backs as well. And so they've struggled to stop the run as well. And that's actually a really good matchup. And DeAndre at $6,100 is awesome. But unless he's going to get 55% of the opportunities, I just don't know if you can play him.
Yeah, I agree.
So other than that, those are kind of the running backs that I'm on this week. Is there anybody else you want to hit on, or you want to jump over to wide receiver?
I'm going to move to wide receiver.
All right. So wide receiver, we have Justin Jefferson up top, 9,100. We already talked about Cooper Kupp. He is going to be out. I think he's out for the year, but we'll see. He's $8,900, but he's on IR, so he doesn't matter. Devontae Adams is 87. Stephon Diggs, 8,300. AJ Brown, who sounds like he should be good to go, is 8K. Jamar Chase is likely still not going to play. He is still actually on crutches, so that is not good. Then you have CeeDee Lamb, who's $7,500. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 72. T. Higgins at 7,100. Chris Olave, Tyler Boyd, Amari Cooper, Gabe Davis, Devonta Smith, Michael Pittman is 61, which is kind of, I think, a little bit cheap. And then Cortland Sutton at 6K, kind of wrap up this 6K range and above. Who are the guys you really want to play this week?
I had zero interest in the Bills before they moved the game to the Dome in Detroit. But now that they are in Detroit and away from that snowstorm, I have a ton of interest in both Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. The Bills have lost 2 straight, and Josh Allen has been practicing, albeit limited, but he's still out there practicing. It's not like his injury is bad enough to where he's not throwing the ball at all. They're just monitoring his workload during the week when he doesn't need to throw it. But he showed last week that he can still, push the ball down the field and get the ball to these wide receivers that he has. So Diggs last week had a ridiculous 16 targets, caught 12 of them for 128, didn't score, and still scored 27 DK points. So Diggs has over 100 yards receiving in all but 3 games this year, and one of those was 93 yards. So does have 7 TDs on the year, hasn't caught a TD in 3 games. So I really like Diggs. Again, any exposure to Buffalo on a slate like this where, there's a lot of uncertainty. We know Buffalo is just going to continue to throw the ball a ton. And so, both Diggs and Gabe Davis make a ton of sense to me. So I really like them. Obviously, Amon-Ra is one of the best floors on the slate. He's going to see double-digit targets. The matchup isn't the best. The New York Giants have actually had a very good pass defense this year. And like we've always said, Jared Goff on the road is definitely something to be concerned with. When you look at the Detroit points per game, they did score 31 in Chicago last week, but Chicago has a much, much, much worse defense than what the Giants are going to roll out there. Detroit only scored 6 points against Dallas. They did score 24 at Minnesota. So on the road, I just definitely have concerns about Goff being able to hit his ceiling. And again, Amon-Ra is going to see double-digit targets, so one of the highest floors, but I definitely have ceiling concerns there. Scrolling down the list, you mentioned your love for Russell Wilson. Cortland Sutton is 6K, which feels too cheap for him. He has only 1 touchdown this year, and his floor is really low. I mean, he has 3 straight games of 3, 5, and 2 DK points. So he definitely has a low floor, but with Jerry Jeudy likely to miss here, and it sounds like Kendall Hinton, who didn't practice today, is at risk of missing here as well. Sutton, it sounds like it could just be the Sutton and Dulcich show, which, I mean, Russ has no issue just targeting just 2 guys. I mean, that's all he did in Seattle. So 6K for Cortland Sutton is very interesting and something that I'm considering this week. Scrolling down the list, I mentioned Justin Fields, who I like a lot. Darnell Mooney attached to him. If Fields hits his ceiling and it's not Kmet that's going with him, it's very likely going to be one of Mooney or Claypool. And Claypool played very limited snaps last week for some reason. So I like Mooney since he's going to continue to be the number 1 guy, and we know that for a fact. So I like Mooney there. Still moving down the list, same guy we played last week. I'm going right back to the well, Donovan Peoples-Jones. And he's the perfect run back for that Buffalo-Cleveland game. We keep talking about Amari Cooper on the road splits. It's been a thing his whole career. I don't know why, but he does way better at home than he does on the road. And it's been the flip for Donovan Peoples-Jones this year. So he had 9 targets last week, 99 yards. That's his highest of the year so far. He's got 99, 81, 71, 74 yards over his last 4 games. Has yet to score a touchdown, but I think at some point that's coming. He's only $4,600. If he was in like $5,500 range, which I think he's going to end up getting there eventually, I would have less interest. But again, on the slate with no value, Peoples-Jones at 4,600 makes a lot of sense. Paris Campbell is somebody that I'm going to be considering just because of his recent rapport with Matt Ryan. He's starting to see double-digit targets in a lot of games with Matt Ryan. And the slot corner for the Eagles, Avonte Maddox, has been put on IR. He missed last game as well. So I think that the slot is where, if Indy is going to throw the ball, is where they're going to be able to have success. I think Jonathan Taylor and Paris Campbell are the keys to success for Indy in this game. So I like him a lot. $4,100 Nico Collins saw 10 plus targets last week. And we know you can attack Washington through the air. So I think Nico Collins, who's essentially taken over the number 1 role there from Brandon Cooks, is what it appears to have happened. I know it's not really a pass-heavy offense, but a guy at 4,100 that saw 10 targets last week is definitely somebody to be in your consideration this week. And the last 2 guys I'll mention, Kendall Hinton, if Judy's out and if he plays, is min price at 3K. So I have interest in him in that scenario. Or he's 3,600, sorry. But it's still cheap enough that is definitely in consideration after Judy left last week. He had 5 targets, caught 4 of them for 62 yards. So it should definitely be in consideration. And then there is a receiver on the Giants. Isaiah Hodgins is 3K. And he was actually just recently signed or claimed off of waivers on the 2nd of November and logged a ton of snaps last week, more than Galladay. He essentially was the starting guy opposite of Slayton, with Wandale manning the slot. So Hodgins at 3K is interesting. If you are just absolutely desperate for a wide receiver punt, and if you're playing Daniel Jones, you can pair Jones and Hodgins together for free essentially. So I think that that's probably the reserved for only large field tournaments. I wouldn't play that in like single entry or anything, but if Hodgins, which he had 2 targets last week for 41 yards, so if you tack on a touchdown to that, he's getting you 12 points at 3K. And there was teams last week that won tournaments with Sky Moore on their roster, and Sky Moore only had 1 catch for 8 yards. So on these slates where these 3K guys, if they do anything, you have such a massive advantage on the field because you're able to jam in on the high price guys that we know are going to do well. So that's the cheapest I'll go, but again, only reserved for very large tournaments.
Yeah, so for me, I think it's going to be, notwithstanding the top guys, but I think T. Higgins, I think, is in a really good spot at $7,100. Pittsburgh has really struggled against opposing wide receivers. They'll have the second most DK points to the position. And so I think T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, who's 6,500, I think both of them are in really good spots this week. So I like both of them as options, either whether you want to play them in a stack with Joe Burrow, obviously, or as just one-offs. I think they both make a lot of sense. And then from there, Terry McLaurin, he's only $5,900. I typically don't like to play him, but he has a real rapport with Taylor Heineke. He is definitely the favorite option there for Taylor Heineke. He saw 11 targets last week. The week before that, he saw 9. He's seen 8 or more targets in 4 straight games, and he's starting to really come on. And like last week, he had 8 catches for 128 yards. This is a matchup against Houston. I think he can definitely exploit. He's only $5,900, just incredibly too cheap for I think the upside that he possesses here, especially in a matchup against Houston. So I do like Terry McLaurin at his price at $5,900. The other options here, I kind of like Allen Robinson at $5,600. I think to me, you have 2 wide receivers here that you could look at, or possibly Tyler Higbee. Matthew Stafford's back practicing in full, so he should be back ready to go playing in this game against the Saints, and in the Superdome. Allen Robinson's 5,600, and then you have Van Jefferson, who I think you could also look at, who is significantly cheaper at 4,500, almost just a little over 1,000 cheaper. Obviously, he's going to take on a bigger role now with Cooper Kupp now done. And then I think from there, I mean, if you really want to get cute, you could get Ben Skoranek, who's $3,900. But I think Allen Robinson at $5,600, I think, is a spot we could definitely look at. They're gonna have to throw the ball to somebody. Their running game is terrible. They can't get anything going there. Matthew Stafford should be back, and so this could be a spot for Allen Robinson finally to earn the money that he's being paid, because he's always been overshadowed by Cooper Kupp. And now that is a massive, massive hole in terms of what you usually see from Cooper Kupp on a weekly basis. I mean, Cooper Kupp commands about 30% of targets. And I mean, there's plenty of weeks where he sees, 15, 12, 13, 14 targets. And now that's going to have to be redistributed to somebody else. So when I look at this team, I think that Allen Robinson, I think, makes the most sense, followed by Van Jefferson is kind of the deep threat here in this offense. I think you look at Allen Robinson, probably be the chain number short intermediate route guy, where Van Jefferson's probably the deeper threat option here between these two. But they're going to have to throw the ball to somebody, and so I think $5,600 Allen Robinson, I think, is a spot you could go with. I also like Darnell Mooney as well at $5,400. Atlanta allows the most DK points to the position. And he's just a little bit harder to trust because, like last week, he only saw 4 targets, 4 catches, 57 yards. But we kind of talked about, I think he's due for just a kind of a big game, because he's still heavily involved in this offense in terms of just target share. It's just they're not a team that throws the ball very much. So if game script goes in that direction, where if the Falcons can put up some points, they're heavy favorites, and they're not heavy favorites, but they're the favorites in that game, have the higher applied point total. If they can put up some points here and force them to throw the ball a little bit more, Darnell Mooney at $5,400 inside the dome against Atlanta, against a team that has really, really struggled to stop opposing wide receivers. They are the only team in the league that has allowed over 2,000 yards to receivers so far on the season. They also allow the second most receiving touchdowns as well. Just the only 2 teams that are worse are Pittsburgh and Jacksonville. So I do like Darnell Mooney at his price at $5,400 if you're wanting to do that. And then George Pickens, I think if you want to run back here in this if you're stacking the Cincinnati game, George Pickens at $5,200. With when you have Chase Claypool gone now from this offense, I think it's just going to open things up a little bit more. Yes, I know he only saw 4 targets last week, but that was just a little bit different of a game there because of game script that they actually won that game. They were leading most of that game, so they were playing much more conservative. I think we're not going to expect that here playing in Cincinnati, a team that can really push them. And so I do like them as well. Excuse me. I agree with Donovan Peoples-Jones. He's still too cheap at $4,600. And then past that, I do agree with your call on Paris Campbell. He seems to have a real connection, a real rapport with Matt Ryan. In the last 3 games that Matt Ryan's played, he has seen 11, 12, and 9 targets in all those games. They're getting doing a lot of creative things to try to get the ball into his hands. And so he is also just too cheap, I think, for the amount of targets he could see in that game. So I do like him as well. And then if you're wanting to pay down at wide receiver, it does sound like Kendall Hinton's going to play. I know you mentioned him. It sounds like he's going to play. It sounds like this was always the plan for them, him not to really practice, so he can be ready to go on Sunday. So, you're on mute.
Yeah, I think if Hinton plays and Judy's out, I definitely think Hinton makes sense.
Man, sorry. I'm like side-eyeing what's going on because I have a lineup right now that's
Well, the game's over.
Oh, he threw an interception?
No, they stopped him on 4th down. They went for it, didn't get it.
I didn't see exactly what happened. Do they have any timeouts left? No.
No, it's over. 2-minute warning. Kneel downs.
Why are they throwing?
Who?
They just threw the ball.
Who threw the ball?
The Titans, and just threw like a 50-yard bomb to Treylon Burks.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that's going to hurt that lineup. That's going to kill that lineup.
I closed out of the window that I had it up in on Prime Video.
They just threw about 40, 50-yard bomb to Treylon Burks.
Jesus, why did they do that? I mean, I guess because they weren't expecting it.
I would assume now that probably ends it. They probably needed 1 first down.
Now they're going to kneel.
Yeah, but that's going to kill that one. Yep, it did. It took me from 15th all the way to 391st. Love showdown.
That actually helped me. I wasn't even cashing, and now I'm cashing pretty easily because I played Burks.
Well, I have quite a bit of Burks, but that one lineup that I was like, really, really hoping for, I did not. So, anyways, let's keep this moving.
Let's keep rolling. I think we can move to tight end, honestly, in defense.
Yeah, I don't think I really have anybody else that I really want to hit on at wide receiver that I can think of. I guess if you had to take a stand, I guess let me ask, just off the top of the 8K guys and above, who would be the guy you'd want?
Diggs?
Yeah.
I mean, Cleveland's defense isn't good, and they're playing in that dome, and the Bills are. If you look at, let me pull up something really, really, really quick. I'm using Twitter for one of the what seems to be one of the last times. I don't know if you've caught what's been going on with that, but I need to search.
So, I definitely agree with Stephon Diggs. I'll be curious to see where his ownership is going to come in at. Because I actually kind of like, I know he's more expensive, but Justin Jefferson, I'm not worried about. There's not a single, there's not anybody on Dallas' secondary that's going to shut Justin Jefferson down. And so he's $9,100. I just think naturally his ownership is going to be suppressed because I think a lot of people are going to want to play that Buffalo game, and I just think he can actually cook this secondary. And I know he's $9,100. He's tougher to get to, but I still think that he is an elite option this week. He is my favorite option up here in the 8K range. 8 to 9, I should say.
Yeah, so I just pulled up pass rate over expectation. Here's all the teams that are throwing the ball more than expected. So you have the Chiefs, not on this slate. The Bengals, who have looked lost outside of the Joe Mixon blow up without Jamar Chase. The Bills, obviously. The Vikings, who you mentioned you like. The Chargers, not on the slate. The Seahawks, not on the slate. The Dolphins, not on the slate. The Steelers, nobody really wants to play Steelers guys outside of one-offs here or there. The Bucks, not on the slate. Colts don't really want to play them against the Eagles. And then Patriots versus the Jets. And then the Eagles, not in the best matchup versus Indy. So those are only the teams that have a higher pass rate over expectation. So it's like, of those teams, I mean, the Bills and the Vikings seem like they're the safest to, put up points through the air. So it's like, if I'm paying up, it's going to be Diggs or Jefferson, 100%. Yeah, I'm not paying up for Devontae Adams in Denver. And Adams been dealing with, an illness and now an abdomen injury over the last couple of weeks. So it's like, yes, he can score 30, but the Denver defense has been so good and their corners are so good. And it's on the road this time. Last time they played, it was in Vegas. So I don't know. It's Diggs or Jefferson for me up top.
Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and jump over to tight ends. You have obviously no Travis Kelce on the slate because they play Saturday Night Football. You have Mark Andrews, who's $6,800. And then you have to, there's a lot of injuries here. So you have to go to TJ Hawkinson at 53. Kyle Pitts is at 44. Dalton Schultz, I've already talked about, at 4,300. Freiermuth at 42. Cole Kmet, who's dealing with a little bit of an issue, but I think he'll probably still play at 41. Tyler Higbee at 41. And then David Njoku actually returned to practice today on a limited basis. That's actually a positive, something positive that's happened with him. He's 3,900. Then you have Greg Dulcich and Frank Moreau, or Foster Moreau, excuse me. He is at 3,700. So what are you wanting to do at tight end?
I actually think tight end is straightforward. I'm playing Schultz at 4,300. I'm playing Dulcich at 3,800. And then likely if Andrews misses is 3,600 against Carolina. But I tend to even side, even if Andrews is out, I think I tend to side with Dulcich and Schultz. I think I give both of those guys an edge just because their game environments are better. Like the Ravens legit could throw the ball like 18 times against Carolina, especially if Gus Edwards is back. So likely he would have to score a touchdown and be very efficient with his minimal targets, even if Andrews misses. Whereas, the Broncos are likely without Judy, and Dulcich could be the number 2 guy there. And Schultz, he's Dak's favorite target. I know Lamb is the best target they have, but Schultz is Dak's security blanket, and he absolutely smashes when Dak is in. And he was, he caught the biggest flack for having Dak missing time when Cooper Rush stepped in, because Rush they flipped, right? Rush targeted Lamb over and over again. But now that Dak's back, Dak prefers to target Schultz. And I know CD had a blow up game last week, but that was legit Lamb's first blow up game with Dak under center. So I really like Schultz this week personally, Schultz and Dulcich. So those are probably the 2 guys I'm going to end up playing, but I think likely is interesting. And I know you'll probably mention the Eagles tight end carousel. I just think that's going to be a bit of a mess with Tyree Jackson coming back from IR. I think that's just a situation I'm going to stay away from. I personally think the Eagles could struggle to score points this week. They didn't look great against Washington at home. Now they're on the road in Indy, and Indy's defense has quietly played very well. And AJ Brown hurt his ankle in the first, his first route he ran last week, and only ended up with 4 targets after that. So I think his injury, he played all the snaps, but he played through his injury because Hurts was not targeting him at all in a game they were trailing the whole time. So if he's hurt and Devontae Smith also has a questionable tag on his name, they're going to be without Dallas Goedert. Like, I could just see the Eagles just struggling to score points in this game. So I'm not sure I want to play that tight end carousel that they're going to have rolling. And I guess all of that is just an argument for liking Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, I mean, Jack Stoll is $2,500. He's probably going to be the starting tight end, but it's not going to be like a Dallas Goedert situation where he's going to
Right.
see,
Yeah.
total amount of targets.
It's not likely plugging in for Mark Andrews in a game, where they're going to have to throw the ball. Like what they play 2 weeks ago against Tampa Bay or something, where likely, had 6 catches or whatever it was for 70 yards, or was it the Saints? I can't remember. But ended up scoring a touchdown, scored like 20 plus DK points. And I just don't think we have that scenario here for the Eagles guys.
Yeah, I think so. As far as tight ends are concerned, like I said, I've already talked about Dalton Schultz. Absolutely love him, and I completely agree. I mean, seeing a big uptick in target share. And somebody else who I think is actually going to be pretty popular because of what he's done and chasing points of what he's done the last 2 weeks, and that's Cole Kmet, who's you've seen seen 6 and 7 targets over the last 2 weeks, and but that's also against two of the worst defenses in the league against tight ends as well. That's where you attack them is with tight ends because Miami is bad, and obviously so is Detroit. Detroit allows the 3rd most DK points, and Miami allows the 4th most DK points to the position. But I'm not going to trust that because if you look at the weeks prior to that, it's a lot of 2s and 3s in terms of targets, and so he could definitely go back and be the pumpkin. Which I'm not worried about that with Dalton Schultz. So if Cole Kmet's going to be really popular at $4,100. I will just pivot over to Dalton Schultz, who's only $4,300 and is doing very similar things, but has a much more projectable volume.
Yeah, Kmet's got 11 catches and 5 touchdowns in his last 3 games. So that tells you where all his value's been coming from.
Yeah, and so with Dalton Schultz, you are comfortable with him, and he is going to locked in to be 6 to 8 targets.
Mm-hmm.
So I love Dalton Schultz. I will play him all day over Cole Kmet. And then, Tyler Higbee is, I think in play at 4K. It's not the greatest matchup. He saw 8 targets last week, but he is somebody that they do lean on. He has games this year where they've targeted him 14 and 10 times and 11 times. So, I mean, it wouldn't shock me if they utilize him more, because he's much more of a move tight end. And so I think Tyler Higbee at 4K, I think you could look at him. 100% agree on Dulcich, who's $3,800. That's just easy, easy to plug him in. And then I also think Juwan Johnson, who's only $3,100, I think is kind of an interesting option. He has scored double-digit DK points in 3 of his last 4 games. He scored 20 and then 12 and then 15.4. He has been utilized inside the red zone. He has the ability to he's a pretty athletic tight end as well. And so he did see 7 targets last week, which is the most he's seen, or tied for the most he's seen all year. But I do think he's kind of a little bit of an interesting option here at $3,100 if you're looking to save some money at tight end. Like I said, $3,100. I do not mind him. And then I think that's kind of the guys that I would love. Like Logan Thomas is interesting at $2,800, but he's just not seeing a ton of opportunity. 4 targets last week against Philly, and then 3 the week before that against Minnesota. But he's only $2,800, so if you're wanting to pay down, maybe that's an option. And then, like I said, if you want to play Jacksonville, who I think is going to be popular because he's $2,500 and people are going to want to play for that punt tight end, I just don't think it makes a whole lot of sense to go with somebody like him.
I agree.
So I think that's kind of where I stand at tight end for me. It's going to be a lot of Dalton Schultz. It's going to be Greg Dulcich. Maybe mix in a couple of these other guys like Higbee or Hayden Hurst. I didn't mention him, but I do think that he, part of a stack. I think you could play him. And then, Juwan Johnson, I think is interesting as well. So those are kind of the guys I'm looking at.
With the lack of wide receiver value that we have this week, is double tight end viable? Like, could you see yourself going Schultz and Dulcich over like Dulcich and Paris Campbell, or,
Yeah, I think it's in play
because TDs are likely at a premium on this slate, right? Minus those specific games we discussed. So it's like, if you can capture some TDs from Dulcich or Schultz or both, which is what you would be playing it for. I mean, I don't know. Tight end just seems like a good place to get value, which is a touchdown dependent spot. And if you're playing somebody for value, you want them to score a touchdown. So,
yeah, I mean, if your build leads you there, yeah, and I definitely think it's in play. Like I said, this slate is kind of a little bit gross. I think trying to figure out a way to get a little different here. And obviously, I know we didn't really talk about it with Mark Andrews. He sounds like he's going to play. He's 100% in play, $6,800, which is cheaper than what he typically runs, right? I guess earlier in the year he was around that price range, and he jumped up in started getting in the 7K range. But Mark Andrews, if he's healthy, he's playing. He's definitely in range. But, anyways, let's go ahead and jump over to defense really quickly. Who's the defense that you're plugging in this week?
I wish I don't think I'm going to have the salary for it, the 3K salary for the Saints against the Rams without Cooper Kupp, and the Rams have just been abysmal even with Cooper Kupp. So it's like, why not just play the Saints, who just got 6 sacks last week? I like them, but I think I'm going to end up paying down for the Steelers. They have TJ Watt back. They're playing at home against Cincy, which we've seen Cincy this year not show up, and they haven't looked great without Jamar Chase, minus the 5 touchdown Joe Mixon game against the god awful Carolina Panthers. So, yeah, I'm probably just going to play the Steelers since they have TJ Watt back. They've got double digit DK points in both games that Watt has played this year, and we know that they were a force last year as well with him. And I haven't seen any. I haven't looked for any updates yet on their secondary. I don't know if you know if Minkah Fitzpatrick or any of those guys are going to play, but
Minkah Fitzpatrick is definitely going to be out. I think he had an appendectomy or something like that, but he's going to be out for a while.
Okay, well, even if he's out, I mean, them getting Watt back is a big deal, and they played well last week against New Orleans. So yeah, I like the Steelers as well at home against Cincy.
That's why I like the Rams, because Andy Dalton looks terrible. Andy Dalton has played terrible. He's making a lot of really bad decisions. They're only $2,900.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is they should. I feel like they should be like up in like. The
and I saw today too that the Saints are going to be without 3 of their starting offensive linemen as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Aaron Donald versus that.
Yeah. So $2,900 Rams, and then, I definitely like that as well. And then I don't know. I mean, maybe the Texans. I mean, Taylor Heineke has thrown an interception, I think, in like 2 or 3 straight games. He sometimes makes some really bad decisions. Maybe you could go with the Texans, but for $2,400, maybe you could do that. But I think that's kind of what I'm looking at right now. As the Rams for sure. I think I'm going to be locking them into a lot of lineups.
Yeah, I think you can't go wrong with one of Saints Rams. Defense in that game is definitely in play, and then like you said, Texans or even Steelers. Any of those 4, I think, is where I would just stick to. I wouldn't go off of those.
Yeah, or possibly the Bears at $2,600 because Mariota. God, some of those passes that he throws.
Yeah, he just doesn't throw the ball is the issue.
Right. Yeah, but
I agree. He sucks, but that's why they run it. 35 times a game, 40 times a game.
Yeah, and then you have Arthur Smith out here just. People try to ask him about Desmond Ridder. He just shuts him down immediately. I'm like, come on, bro. We're talking about Marcus Mariota. He's looked terrible. Okay? Yeah. There's no way. I know. I get it. You're the coach. You're trying to hype your player up and all that stuff. But like, and who knows?
Kev, they're battling for first place in their division.
They're not making it. Okay? Like, it's not happening.
Them and the Panthers keep playing for first place in their division.
The Bucks are back. Okay, I feel pretty good about the way they looked, over in Germany. So I think the Bucks are easily going to win that division.
They should.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're at that time, just over the 1 hour mark. Let's go ahead and build a lineup here, so we can get out of here. Go ahead and kick things off.
I'm gonna let you decide QB. I think I was gonna play this running back no matter what. So let's plug in David Montgomery. Even if we were to play Fields or not, I would have played him.
David Montgomery?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go Kirk Cousins.
Okay. Might as well pair him with Jefferson.
All right. I'm going to plug in Dalton Schultz.
All right.
So that leaves 48-80 remaining with a running back, 2 wide receivers, a flex, and a defense left.
Yeah, slate's tough, man. It really is.
Let's plug in the Rams D. They're $2,900. That leaves $53.75 remaining. If we can always drop down if we want.
All right, let's try to get Diggs in there. I definitely want a Buffalo guy. If we can't make it work, we'll just drop him to Gabe Davis. But let's try.
Okay.
Running back is where it would get tricky.
Well, I think there's definitely some cheaper wide receivers that we can get to.
Yeah, because you could mini stack DPJ with Diggs, and then you could play double tight end and go like Dulcich, but then you're going to be looking at I don't even know what the remaining would be for running back, probably like 5K. It's just gross down there. But like then you could play Diggs and like Ramondre Stevenson probably. I mean, not Diggs, Gabe Davis.
Man,
that does fit. It's 100. Yeah, so with that build, Diggs would leave you 4,800 at running back, but Gabe Davis leaves you 6,800.
I don't know how you feel about this. What we could do, if you want, so what we could do is we could go Brian Robinson. He's $5,300.
Okay.
And then not play Devin Montgomery. And you could play like Devin Singletary, who we talked about as well. He's $5,800. And then you could make all that fit. Obviously, we would have Diggs and Singletary. But
it's still two guys from the Bills.
Yeah. And so that would be Cousins, Brian Robinson.
Slate and scoring.
Yeah, it'd be Cousins, Brian Robinson, Singletary, Justin Jefferson, Stephon Diggs, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Dalton Schultz. And then I plugged in Kendall Hinton, who's $3,600 because that's a game that I do like, and then Rams D, and that with no money remaining makes that lineup work.
Yeah, I'd be good with that as a tournament team for sure.
I mean, if we wanted to, we could always drop from the Rams and not play them. You know, that would free up a little bit more money if that's something we wanted to do, and get one of the cheaper 4K. You know, if you have Brian Robinson, maybe if we wanted to, we could go like Nico Collins, who's $4,100. With a little mini stack with Brian Robinson and Nico Collins, so it's a little bit more correlated.
True. Yeah.
And then that would leave us with, we'd have to play either Texans, Vikings, Browns, Steelers, Panthers, or Colts. Which I guess you talked about the Steelers, so I guess we could just plug them in.
Yeah, I like the Steelers personally. They're at home.
All right. I think that looks a little bit better.
Yeah.
All right. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go Cousins, Brian Robinson, Singletary, Justin Jefferson, Stephon Diggs, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Dalton Schultz, Nico Collins, and Steelers D with $100 remaining on the table. This week is interesting. It is there's a lot of different ways we can go here with this week. But I don't know. I think this is a good week to maybe get a little bit different. Because I don't think there's like chalk. I don't think is something that you're gonna have to worry about as much this week as we have in the other weeks. So I do think this week lends itself to getting a little bit more different, and so I do like that. And then obviously, you know, hey, maybe don't blow all your bankroll this weekend because Thursday is the glorious Thanksgiving Day slate that we're looking forward to. So that should be fantastic. That we'll be back for. We're going to try to get Ryan for the first time on the show this year. So that should be good. Hopefully I got to reach out to him and confirm. And then hopefully we can get D-Bro on. So what we're probably going to do is go live Tuesday night on YouTube for that show, I think is what we kind of talked about. So we can get the show out and get it produced. And then we'll come back again probably, I don't know, we'll have to decide another day for me and Maddie to record the main slate show. Either it's going to be Friday or Saturday sometime if we can make that work for this week. So you'll get 2 shows, double dip next week. Of the DFS DJ Nation. So hope everybody has a good rest of the week. Hope everybody wins some money this weekend. I think it's, like I said, going to be a little bit interesting, get a little bit different. So hope everybody has a good rest of the weekend, like I said. And we will be back again early next week for the Thanksgiving slate, our favorite slate of the year. You can expect a 3.5-hour show for a 3-game slate, because that is what we do. It's tradition around these parts. So keep it locked in here. Have a good weekend. We'll see you next week. Bye.